Hi, this is Alex with Maple Leaf Coffee Roasters. I'm here today to talk about our December 2024 Club Coffee, a cool honey processed coffee from Ethiopia. Check it out. So as a reminder for everyone, the Coffee Club is a program where club members are offered a limited edition, club members only coffee every month that I bring in, roast 3 different ways, send out a whole bunch of notes about the coffee itself, and give people a choice to choose one of those 3 different roasts. We've always tried to bring in something exotic and a little bit interesting and different for this club, and so if you're interested in giving it a shot, there will be a link in the show notes. Feel free to check it out, and I will be able to add you to a waiting list because it is kind of gated for the number of people that we have in the club. So this month is definitely one of my fun coffee options. I chose to bring in a coffee from Ethiopia, specifically the Sidamo region, and this one happens to be a honey processed coffee. And I always like to do something that's a little bit different from the natural wash process coffees because it kind of gives a little bit of variety, a little bit of different sort of spin on an existing coffee flavor and profile that we've had in the club before. So the other fun characteristic about this coffee, and we'll have a picture up to it to show you kind of what it looks like, is the beans are fairly small, and that does have an effect on the roasting of the coffee itself. Very chaffy as well, so they produce a lot of the skin that comes off of the beans, which those two things put together, the combination of the smaller beans plus the high chaff, do make roasting this coffee a little bit different. It takes on heat very differently, which means that it roasts very differently, which means that the flavor can kind of get impacted if you don't take some care in roasting it carefully to make sure that it doesn't kind of get scorched or burned or move too quickly through the roast. I will show you a picture on the table here. I do have kind of one of our normal size coffee beans, coffee from Nicaragua, along with the light roast and the raw beans for the Ethiopian coffee this month too. So coffees from Ethiopia and specifically the Sidamo region generally tend to be on the fruitier end of things. Not always a very fruit-forward types of coffees, but usually they'll have a kind of fruit tint. And a lot of times they'll also have a little bit of an herbal, kind of floral variety to it as well. Generally speaking, they'll usually be a little bit on the sharper end of things. But this is one for both not only the coffee itself, but also the processing method, kind of tone that back a little bit so it's very easy to drink. So just first of all, to talk about the processing method itself, the honey process is an interesting one. It is kind of a cross between a natural and a wash process in some ways. And there's a couple different types of honey processing methods out there. You usually hear like a red honey, yellow honey. There's a couple different types to go around. And while they're a little bit different in the specifics, the honey processing method is one where they sort of let the coffee dry from the sun for a little bit, and then they run it through what is normally conventionally a wash process method. So this method does produce something that is a little like a richer, fuller flavor, really tones down the acidity in a coffee itself too. And it is a kind of a continually growing number of coffees in the world are available with this honey process method. They generally tend to be a little more expensive than a natural or even a wash process coffee, but I think the extra things that it does to the flavor are pretty fun and worth a shot. So I thought this month this would be a fun chance to try a honey process African coffee. I don't think this is actually something I've had in the normal shelves or even as part of the coffee club program before. So this was a new experience for me to try out one of these coffees as well. So as far as the taste goes on the light, medium, and dark, I really saw something really interesting in all 3 roast levels this month. The light roast had a kind of like sweet, sugary, kind of a chocolatey nature to it. Had a little bit of like a berry kind of tone too. So on the flavor wheel, the berry flavor kind of goes from raspberry to strawberry to blueberry, that kind of thing. But I saw more of a blueberry sort of tint to it in the grounds. The taste itself had kind of like a little bit of a lemony citrus zip to it. Very clean finish on this one too. So though it did have a variation in flavor, every sip was a little bit different. There wasn't a roughness to this coffee by any means, and because of that honey processing method, very mellow, very easy on the stomach, not sharp or acidic by any means. So I think if you're a person that doesn't normally go for the light roasts and you want to give yourself a little bit of surprise this month and get something that isn't that sweeter, citrusy, a little bit of that kind of strawberry tint, this is going to be a fun one for you to play around with and to give a shot to. The medium roast turns a little bit more what you'd expect out of a general medium roast coffee, more chocolatey, a little bit like of a nutty tint to it as well. The kind of fruit flavors turned in more of a dry fruit this time. So I think the medium roast level on this turned it a little bit of a drier finish along with that kind of dried fruit. Still had a little bit of a touch of like a berry tone to it, but it was a little bit more muted than the light roast, which is generally what you'd expect. It's definitely a filling flavor out of this coffee too. A lot of times with the African coffees, even as medium roasts, they will be a very tea-like consistency. So if you think about drinking, say like a green tea or even an herbal tea compared to drinking a cup of coffee, a lot of times a cup of coffee is a little bit more filling in comparison to something in that tea spectrum. So I actually found this medium roast to be really rather filling for what I would normally have expected. And again, I think that's the combination of the medium roast, but also the honey processing method on this coffee as well. As far as the dark roast goes, definitely still something interesting in this dark roast coffee. My general tendency for most folks is for African coffee is to tell them to stay away from a dark roast because you sort of blow out some of the really fun cool taste characteristics in an African coffee. And a lot of times for any African coffee, you're kind of coming to the table to try to get as much of that coffee flavor as you can. And of course, as we've talked about before, once you roast the coffee dark, you tend to accentuate the roast itself rather than the coffee flavor, which is not a bad thing, it's just the way it works. But you still got out of this dark roast a kind of filling flavor, more of a baker's chocolate sort of tint, which is not unexpected from a dark roast. That dry finish that we saw in the medium roast was a little bit more sharp in this roast level. So if you're looking for something that has that kind of dry finish, but still has a richer, fuller flavor to it, as a kind of cool contrast between those two things. We still saw that kind of touch of fruit flavor in this as well. Not a fruit-forward coffee. It's not like some of the Guji or other Sidamo coffees that we've had as part of the club or part of our regular selection before, but there still was a kind of cool berry undertone to a lot of this that very similar to the light and medium. You're going to get a little bit of a different flavor every sip of the cup for this one too. I also saw a little bit of a kind of cocoa powder flavor, like I said. Just a lot of complexity for a dark roast though. So I think if you're a person that still wants to go with the dark roast this month, you're going to see something interesting and exotic, a little bit different every sip you take, which is kind of unexpected in my experience for dark roasts. Usually dark roasts, you get all of the roast kind of profile and you don't get too much else, maybe a little bit of flavor at the edges too. So really looking forward to folks giving this one a shot this month. I think this is definitely one of those coffees that I'll remember, and when I'm looking around for a cool African coffee to pull in the future, I'll have a better sense of what a honey process will do to some of these conventionally Ethiopian African flavors too. So looking forward to seeing everyone back in January and the start of the new year for another great Club Coffee video. Take care.